In this video, we are going to look at the last section of the collection view, the footer section, and it should go pretty quickly because of all the infrastructure that we already have in place. In terms of the section of the layout, it's pretty similar to the first one, only there's 4 items per section instead of 1. So yeah, let's dive in and get it started. First thing we're going to do is add a new cell. This is going to be a footer cell. We need to import Anchorage and UI kit. It is going to be pretty simple. It's going to be pretty similar layout to the header, honestly. We're going to have a stack. We are going to have a title label. And we are going to have a subtitle label. In configure, we need to set the stack's axis equal to vertical and the spacing equal to 4. We're going to set the title label's font equal to custom style headline and the subtitle labels font equal to subheadline. Then in constrain, we're going to add a stack, and the stack is going to add arranged subviews, title label, subtitle label. Then these stacks horizontal anchors need to equal the horizontal anchors of this view, and the stack's vertical anchors need to equal the vertical anchors plus 28. So that will constrain at 28 pixels from the top and 28 pixels from the bottom, and then 0 on the sides. Then we need to conform to content configuring view by adding a configure method. Just down here, we're going to say the title label's text equals content title, and the subtitle label's text equals the content dot subtitle. And that's good enough for now. But now we need to add a new background. So in our background view file, I'm going to add a new style. We have this inverted background view. We're going to add a new class called secondary background view, which is going to be a background view. And here we need to override provide background color to return secondary system background as the color. Then we need to add a new background style, so I'll add a secondary, and then in here we need to map the class by saying case secondary. We're going to return secondary background view.self. That's how easy it is to add a new background into our setup. Now we just need to use it. So let's add a layout section. I'm going to do that by going to our definitions. I'm going to just copy the side scrolling to item because it's pretty close to that. It's at least a good place to start. We're going to call it footer. So our item size needs to be a fractional width of 1. The height dimension needs to be an estimated 60. The item is an item from the item size. It's not changing. We don't need any content insets on this. The group size is going to be a fractional width of 0.7 and the height dimension estimated 200. The group is going to be a vertical group with that layout size. And instead of using this function, we're going to use sub items. Just give it 2 item. Now our header size needs to be basically the same as up here. So I'm just going to copy this from side scrolling. 1 item. We're going to make a section from that group. We still want group paging. We need to add the boundary supplementary items. So we have a header. We need inner group spacing of 12, content insets. Actually don't want any on the top this time because there's already 28 pixels from here to the top of the cell, so we don't need any more space there. Then we still want 20, 20, and 20. And then we need to add our background. So we'll say section, add background style secondary, which we just added. Cool. So now we have a footer section. So we need to show it. So in our content model, let's uncomment that last section. Let's uncomment this header. And let's uncomment all this content for the footer. Then we need to update our make collection view function to use it. So in the case of .info, we're going to return .footer. And then in make data source, when we switch on section there, we need a case .info. Here we're going to let the registration equal the footer cell. Except for I'm realizing we never made that type alias. So let's go back to the footer cell. We have our class, but we need a type alias called footer cell, which is a content cell, or footer view. So now that should compile, and then we need to return this same thing. Just copy and paste it. That builds, that's good. Let's run it and see what it looks like. Whoop. We've only got 2. Did something wrong in the layout. I only put 2 items. What we actually need here is item, 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 item. 4 of them. So let's run that. That's looking pretty good. One difference is our little header for this column. These little headers are formatted our headline style and not whatever style this is. So let's handle that real quick. So back in footer cell in the configure method, let's switch on the contents style. You may not remember we added this back when we defined the content model. We've never used it so far, but now we are. So if it's standard, we are going to do this. We're going to use the headline font for the title label. If it is, let's put that on its own line just because it's a little complex. If it is title, we will use title 4 for that. And if we don't have one, we'll just break. That'll handle the optional case. There we go. Now our header things are looking okay. Now all we're missing is these separators. So let's look at how to deal with that. I went back and forth when I was coming up with this on the best way to implement it. And the method I landed on is to kind of break it up into a couple of parts so that things will stay decoupled. First, what we're going to do is define a protocol that provides a method to show a separator or not. We will leave it open to let individual cells decide if they want to have a separator at all. And we will pass a closure as an argument to registration to allow the data source to define if a specific cell should show a separator or not. And that'll come into play here because this last cell is not showing a separator, only the first three. So our something needs to determine when or when not to show that cell. And what we're going to do is have the data source make that determination. Okay, so first let's just add a separator to our footer cell. So how I'm going to do that is just add a private equal UI view. Then in configure, we're going to say separator, the background color equals quaternary label. In constrain, we want to add subviews, stack, and separator. Then we want to say separator dot top anchor equals the bottom anchor of the view. We want to say the separator horizontal anchors equals the horizontal anchors of the view, and the separator height equals 1. The height anchor. Then we're going to add a protocol. I'm going to do this in the content cell file next to content configuring view. I'm going to add a protocol called separator showing. This needs to be any object. Then we're going to add an extension on content cell. That makes content cell separator showing when the view is also a separator showing. So if the view that we're wrapping, which only has to be a content configuring view, it doesn't have to be a separator showing view. Except for, I think I misspelled this. Separator showing. There we go. So this view doesn't have to be a separator showing view, but it can be. So this extension will make content cell itself separator showing if the view is also separator showing. So we need to add that function here, show separator. And all we're going to do is pass that along to the view. Then we need the footer view to conform to that protocol, which I'll toss in an extension. Let's build real quick so that I can get this function. What we're going to do here is say the alpha equals should show. It's going to be 8. If not, and it's going to be 0. So it's not going to be full visibility, even if it should show. So now in our registration, back in content cell, when we call configure, let's also just, for now, call cell.show. Oh, we need to cast the cell. So if let cell equal cell as separator showing, cell.show separator true. We'll just use true for now. So what we should see here is if our cell is separator showing, we're going to call showSeparator true. So we should be showing the separators. Now we're not seeing them on these cells, obviously, because we didn't add them, but we did add them to the footer cells and we are seeing them, so that's good. The only problem is we still have it on the bottom where we don't want it. So instead of just passing true here, let's have a way to determine. Now how we're going to do that is add to this registration, call a parameter. We're going to call showSeparator. That's going to be an escaping function or closure that takes an index path and returns a Boolean. And by default, we're going to give it a default, which doesn't care about the parameter and returns false. This way, if we don't care to pass in the showSeparator for a certain registration, we have a default and it's just going to be false all the time. And then in here, we can ask, so that function, we can say showSeparator. Let should show equal showSeparator with our current index path. So we're now going to use this index path that we get in our closure. We're going to pass that in and we'll get a Boolean back. So this will be a Boolean. We can pass that into the showSeparator function. So here in our registration, we're asking whoever set up the registration to provide a closure that we're going to call to see if we should show the separator or not. And then we're going to pass that information onto the cell and the cell can determine how it wants to handle that. Then we just in make data source need to update our registration for the info section. So the rest of these will be fine because of that default value. But here we want to add a closure and we get an index path. We need to return a Boolean. So I'm going to look at the index path. And if the remainder of it being divided by 4 does not equal 3, we're going to return true. Otherwise, we'll return false. If you're not familiar with modulo math, what this is going to do is say, look at the index. It's going to divide it by 4 and see what the remainder is. Now, if we count through these, you'll see that that's going to lead to the fourth ones not having a separator. So this is index 1, or this is index 0. So 0 divided by 4 is going to equal 0. This is index 1. So 1 divided by 4 is going to have a remainder of 1. 2 divided by 4 is going to have a remainder of 2. And 3 divided by 4 is going to have a remainder of 3. Then 4 divided by 4 is going to have a remainder of 0. So you can see that only this one will return false. If we run it, you can see that we have separators on these 3 and not on the bottom ones, which is exactly what we were going for. So there you go. We added a new layout for that cell. We added a new background, and we added in the infrastructure to add separators on any of our cells. We could add separators anywhere else that we want to with this infrastructure, but it just so happens in the Airbnb app, that's the only place where we have separators between the cells. In the next video, we will deal with the header. We'll get that laid out and animate it up and down. So that'll be a fun one. I'll see you there.